We were the lucky country. We went camping on weekends. We played cricket in the park with the family. We spent time making memories that would last forever. Now we have lost our jobs, our homes, our businesses, and our lives. Our state and federal governments have taken our rights away, destroyed our freedoms, and have been ruling by decree in the name of safety. This is not the new normal. We will not watch our country be run by bureaucrats. We will stand up and we will fight back. It is time to mark the day that matters to every single Australian. That day is Freedom Day. On the 4th of December, we will rise for freedom over fear. We will demand an end to the lockdowns, an end to the state of emergency, and we will demand real leadership. The Liberal Democrats will rise for our day of freedom. We will rise to end the state of emergency. We will rise and take our country back. Will you rise with us on Freedom Day? Freedom Day, December 4, 2021. Join the fight for freedom. Join the Liberal Democrats.
Authorised J. Humphreys, Mount Weatherly, Victoria.
Welcome everyone to this week's episode of Liberty Chat. This is our weekly 1 hour live webinar made available to members of the Liberal Democratic Party, which we then release on our socials so that everyone else can view and get the wisdom of our esteemed panellists. We have David Limbrick.
G'day everyone.
We have Campbell Newman.
G'day.
And then also Mr. John Ruddick.
Good evening, everybody.
Welcome to all of our guests and members, and welcome to our panelists. It's been another busy, crazy week. Hopefully, when you are also watching this, if you're not already a member, you can get to our website, ldp.org.au, and join up. You can also volunteer. You can obviously donate to the party. And you can also register your interest to be a candidate, because we're getting a lot of rumours about when the next election might be. And I heard today, 11th of December. So who knows? I don't know if anyone's got any more insight on that, but David's shaking his head. But we're also celebrating Victoria's Segregation Day. Freedom Day. So I'm on the bubble.
I'm on the goon.
Goon, Japanese
Victoria.
beer.
Queensland manufactured, yes.
Queensland manufactured.
There's not enough freedom for something fancy. There's only enough freedom for goon.
Yeah, well, I do have a Prosecco. It's not champagne.
Okay.
Anyways, Daniel says I'm pretty esteemed. Thanks, Daniel. So we're going to start. We'll talk more about Freedom Day. David, what does Freedom Day mean in Victoria now? Are we catching up to New South Wales? Are we anywhere near WA or Queensland? What does this mean now?
No, we're nowhere near New South Wales. So the main difference between, so we've got segregation now in Victoria and New South Wales. It appears that in New South Wales, they're not particularly policing it very well, which I'm happy about. In Victoria, I don't really know how they're policing it, but the big difference is that New South Wales has said that as of December 1st, all segregation will end. Now, whether or not you believe that is up to you, but it's good that they've put a date on it. But in Victoria, they've said it's going to go for as long as it takes, well into the new year. And this is a big, big problem in Victoria. So I've had contacts from thousands of constituents who are really concerned. They're either concerned about their own job because, for whatever reason, they've chosen not to have a vaccine and they're worried about losing their job. I've also heard from bosses who don't want to sack workers. They've got valued workers that have chosen not to have the vaccine and they're freaking out. They don't know what to do about it. They're worried about two things. They're worried about sacking them because they don't want to sack them. And they're also worried about sacking them because of the legal ramifications, because the government hasn't made it very clear what happens when you actually do sack someone, whether they actually have a legal recourse or not. It's a bloody nightmare. One of the things that the government did that was really, really stupid, and I brought up in Parliament last week, was they came out with an announcement on the 1st of October saying that all authorised workers needed to be vaccinated, right? And their bosses needed to collect their vaccination status. Now, big companies went to their legal department and they said, do nothing until the legal mandate comes out. And so big companies are probably fine because there was a 1 week gap between the announcement and the legal mandate coming out. But lots of smaller businesses who get shafted as usual by the government, they thought they were doing the right thing. They went to ask their employees for vaccination certificates, but they had no legal authority to do so. And this is a huge problem. If you look at the Australian Immunisation Register Act, collecting immunisation record data without authority is actually a criminal offence with punishable by up to 2 years jail. So the government, through their incompetence, I suppose, has, caused this situation where I think possibly thousands of businesses are terribly exposed legally and in big trouble. And even the ones that think they're doing the right thing and sacking people, there's no certainty about whether there's going to be, legitimate fair work claims. It's an absolute cluster. Also, you're not allowed to go to the pub unless you've been vaccinated. They've got this vaccine passport thing. There's an app on your phone. The government's been crowing about how 2 million people have already set up their vaccine status on their phone. What that really means is that 4.8 million people haven't. It seems like a huge problem. And even if people are acting in good faith and doing this well, there's a lot of people who are not going to be able to navigate this well. I'm thinking older people who don't know how to log on to MyGov, don't have a smartphone. Like my mum, she doesn't have a smartphone. They don't know how to do all this stuff. They don't want to participate in it. Other people who don't have Medicare cards. It's surprising to a lot of people that a lot of people don't have a Medicare card in Australia, but yes. Foreign students don't have a Medicare card.
ADF members don't have a Medicare card either.
Is that right? I didn't know that. Yeah. So tourists, people here on working holidays, also, not that there's many tourists here at the moment, but there's a whole cohort of people that don't have a Medicare card. Now, it is possible to get your vaccination certificate without a Medicare card, but it's a lot of mucking around. Now, all the instructions how to do this so far have all been in English. So communities that predominantly, speak English as a second language are going to have terrible trouble navigating this. So my fear is that there is going to be a massive class of people, even though they're vaccinated, are not going to be able to participate properly in society. And I think this is a big, big problem.
Well, I had my cold dead heart was a little bit warmed earlier today when I checked on Twitter, and one of the high up trending thing in Australia was #Dan lockout failed. And a whole lot of people finding that first day of freedom, and they were going out and having no problems going into cafes, restaurants, bars, and not having to worry about vax passports. So who knows how well they'll be able to police it, because as you say, if the businesses can get fined, they're sort of having to take control of people's medical information, which is a bit interesting. We've had a whole bunch, and as Craig says, we're in a virtual pub right now. Cheers to you, Craig. Yes, we are.
Cheers. There has been pretty poor compliance with a lot of the QR code check-in stuff. And businesses don't naturally want to do this, right? Because they know that it doesn't really improve workplace safety. They don't want it, they're saying, oh, well, the vaccination rate is 70% now. That means that they'd have to exclude 30% of their market. No business wants to voluntarily exclude 30% of their customers, right? And even if they did want to do that, the practicalities of, telling people to go away at the door of your business, it's pretty horrific, I think, especially for a small business.
It's just totally
especially
outrageous.
For a small business.
Well, how dare they make small business, coffee shops, restaurants, bars, etc., act as coppers? That's what they're doing. It's just outrageous.
And I actually feel very torn about this, because on the one hand, I appreciate the terrible position that these small businesses have been put in. They've basically been co-opted into being, enforcers of state policy where they don't really want to do it. and they're having to enforce all this stuff, and they're in deep trouble. Like, if they don't enforce it properly, the fines on this stuff are like horrific. Like, these businesses have been through so much already. Most of them are hanging on by a thread. They can't afford $10,000 fines and stuff like what they're proposing. So I just think it's totally outrageous what they're doing. They should provide businesses the choice, right? Businesses should be able to choose whether they discriminate or not. And if businesses choose to discriminate, I'm happy to let the market decide on that stuff, right? Yeah, let the market decide. But the way it is at the moment, businesses don't have a choice. And so my heart goes out to those businesses that don't want to be put in this position. Some of them are just refusing to open. Or some of them are going under as well. Like, there's a number of bakeries that I've seen. They've only got a small number of staff. They might have like 5 or 6 staff working at the bakery. 2 of them might be bakers. And if 2 or 3 of those staff members don't want to get a vaccine, then, especially if one of them's a baker, you can't just easily replace a baker. It's a highly skilled trade, and so there's a bakery in Ivanhoe that I got a photo of. They've just decided to close up and finish. It's all over.
Well, even so many of the pubs and the larger pubs, there's no point them opening with such crazy restrictions. It's far too expensive. A lot of the beauticians, there's all these underground beauticians and hairdressers, and I've still got to find a hairdresser myself. But and that's what's happening. A lot of these things are going underground. So,
Kirsty, can I add? There's a big part of Australia which has been ignored, which is the Northern Territory. The Northern Territory has the world's most extreme segregation policy. They said, and it barely got any attention because most of the media is on board with it, but the Northern Territory Chief Minister, Labor Party, of course, I mean, the Liberal Party have been terrible, but all the Labor Party premiers and the New Zealand Labor Prime Minister have been a lot worse. The Labor Party Chief Minister in the Northern Territory 10 days ago said, but if you come into contact with a vulnerable person, you have to get vaccinated. Now, they classified a vulnerable person as an Aboriginal person. Well, 30 to 35% of the Northern Territory is an Aboriginal person. So you can't walk down the street without coming into contact with, quote, a vulnerable person. I could be wrong, but I don't think one Aboriginal person in Australia has died of COVID, but they still want to classify them as vulnerable. So, and Western Australia this week came out with something that's not quite as extreme, but it's almost there. So, as you said, David, Dominic Perrottet said on the 1st of December that, there's going to be no segregation. Let's hope like hell that there's no back down on that. Let's, and that's what we're saying on.
Yeah, I'm saying
it's really important.
A lot of comments in there from ladies offering, with hairdressers, the underground hairdressers. So please email me, contact LDP.
I know someone that got a black market haircut, and they said it was one of the most exhilarating experiences of his life. So I don't
even remember when my last haircut was. Yes. Now, okay, we'll move on from that now, and because something else really big happened this week. A couple of days ago, we released our next policy in our wonderful Freedom Manifesto, which is coming out in a few weeks' time. John Ruddick is one of the authors of our Freedom Manifesto, but our second policy that came out, obviously the COVID one was our first one. The second policy that came out the other day was our cheap energy policy. Now, it's been pretty exciting, obviously, with the Libs going with their net zero. It's caused a bit of an outrage amongst a lot of their voters. But John, can you please tell us a little bit about this new policy?
Okay, well, the guts of it is this. The Liberal Democrats believe in energy neutrality. So there are various forms of energy, and we believe that the government should step out of the way and let the private sector promote all the energy sources that they can commercialise. Now, we believe that one of the ones that we highlight is the nuclear energy. Australia, now to produce nuclear energy, you need uranium. Now, Australia has not been looking for uranium, but we're obviously a big mining company. But even without looking for uranium, we've got about 1/3 of the world's proven reserves of uranium. Okay, now, uranium is the most, if you happen to be very concerned about carbon dioxide, I mean, nobody is going to dispute this. I mean, there's a lot of arguments about energy policy, but no one will dispute this fact. Nuclear energy is the most carbon efficient form of energy you can have. And it also barely has any waste. Now, look, the waste that it does have, toxic nuclear waste, well, we could go and build big pits out in the outback and dump it down there. But this is an important point about our energy neutrality program. Let's say that that you're an Australian and you really strongly believe in reducing carbon dioxide. Okay, no problem. Well, you can opt to have a energy source which is reducing as much carbon dioxide as possible. And then we believe that you should convince your neighbours and your friends and maybe get involved in politics to encourage other people to do that. But we believe that when the government gets involved and favours one form of energy over another form of energy, what absolutely inevitably happens is spivs get involved, lobbyists get involved, corrupt politicians get involved, and people make money out of the government favouring one form over another. So if you happen to really believe that carbon dioxide is going to bring on the apocalypse in the next few years, well, look, use a renewable form of energy that you believe reduces less carbon dioxide. So we are the Freedom Party. We are the Free Energy Party. We believe, that we should have public debate. We believe the government should step out of it. We believe it's the best energy policy in Australia. So everybody that's listening, we're going to be coming out with this Freedom Manifesto shortly. It's got 10 fantastic policies. This is one of the important ones. They're all important, and it's going to be a beautiful PDF policy, and we want you to pass it around to every single person you know.
Yeah, I'm actually very excited about this manifesto. Now, Campbell, whilst we're still talking about energy and nuclear, you were on radio this morning talking about a similar thing.
Yeah, look, I was invited actually on a radio station called Flow FM, which broadcasts into southern New South Wales, the border riverlands and into South Australia, and they contacted us because they saw us put this policy out, the nuclear policy. So it was good. It was good. We got to talk about that, but also about net zero. And probably I'll come back to the nuclear in a sec, but just to talk net zero for a moment, it's quite interesting that the Prime Minister has gone down this road. And I think the mindset is this, ladies and gentlemen. He thinks that he's got polling from Crosby Textor, that the big pollster and sort of gurus for the coalition, that 80% of Australians supposedly support net zero and want to see that. And I think he thinks that that's how he wins over the middle ground. The trouble is, my observation is, and maybe I'm being Queensland centric, obviously we're a coal state, but I think it's driving the base of the Liberal National Party to sort of heights of rage I've not seen before. And I use as a bit of a metric, I look at the comments on certain articles on the Australian newspaper, which are getting huge numbers, 800, 900 comments that are going 80, 90% against the PM and quite vitriolic. They're not buying it. They've been strong, if you like, climate change, skeptics. And for the record, I started off being a believer probably 30 years ago. And, I probably got even more of a believer when Inconvenient Truth came out. And ever since then, I've become more and more and more skeptical. So these days, I'm quite happy to be a skeptic. But I digress. So, look, I think that's the politics playing there, that the PM thinks it's great stuff. I really think it's a big mistake. And I think that it will drive people from, voting for the Liberal Party or the National Party into the arms of other parties. It's our job, it's our challenge in this campaign to say that we are the sensible alternative, offering real leadership, and people should come to us rather than say Clive Palmer or Pauline Hanson. Back on the nuclear thing, just one little bit, just to amplify what John said. The problem is this, that there's a ban on nuclear, right? There's ban on nuclear energy. Some states, by the way, have bans on uranium exploration and mining. When I was Premier, we overturned the ban on uranium mining. The Labor Party then put it back in. But there's a ban on nuclear power generation. And for all these people say, oh, you'll hear people say, oh, but it's not economic, it doesn't stack up. Well, it's very easy to say, and channeling John, you just say, listen, take off the ban, permit it with the appropriate safeguards, let the free market decide. And that's really our policy. Again, coming back to where John started, we're energy agnostic. It should be a free market. And if you want to know why we're paying high prices for power in this country, it's because of bloody regulation. Regulation has done that, and interference with greens, promoting green schemes, the renewable energy target, paying for the solar feed-in tariff that people get. It's all added up. And that's why we pay high price for power in an energy-rich country.
Very, very true. Now, so tonight we were also supposed to have 2 guests on, but we had some technical difficulties with Satya in Washington. Just our first international guest. We'll actually record him during the week, and we'll have him on next week. But what that means is that we have a bit more time for our very special guest, Ms. Krystle Mitchell. And we're going to welcome Krystle on now.
Round of applause.
Hi, Krystle.
Thank you, guys. Thanks. I feel very welcome.
Now, Krystle, as many of you may know, has been a little bit famous over the last few weeks. There's some rounds of applause by Adam in the chat box and Rita as well. So it's all happening, and Clady. So Krystle obviously is a very brave Vic Poll member who, and she'll explain her reasons for leaving. But if you haven't already seen the Discernible interview, we did share it on the invite email, and maybe someone will put it in the chat box as well. It's a great interview with someone who we're also a fan of, Mr. Matt Wong at Discernible. Now, Krystle, welcome to Liberty Chat.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so how has your whirlwind life been over the last couple of weeks since your interview and your resignation?
Look, it has been crazy to say the least. I don't think that I've ever worked this hard and not had a job in my life. There's still just so many things going on behind the scenes. I'm still working with current serving members that are fighting the vaccine mandates that they're dealing with. But in terms of, like the experiences that I've had since I did the interview, it has mostly been just so overwhelmingly positive. It's just completely blown me away. And in my darkest moments where I was, thinking, oh my God, what have I done? And really, just either questioning myself or feeling really bad. It's honestly been the messages of support from the community and from police that have flooded my messenger on Facebook or in LinkedIn, which I joined, or even text messages for those that have got my number. And that's what's kept me going, honestly. So it's just been overwhelmingly positive. And perhaps maybe, the negative comments that have been out there, perhaps my friends and family have shielded me from those. But look, I did jump on to, I think it was The Age, did an article about it. And I read some of the comments on there that were negative. And to be fair, I didn't think that they were that bad. A big part of my message on Matt Wong's Discernible project was that, I was really getting sick and tired of the maligning language and the segregation that we were using to separate people and reduce people to just this one thing, one way or another, and all of this bad words and bad language that was being bandied around the place. So in the negative comments that I saw, what I was really pleased to see was that there was very, very little just stupid name calling and actually just, a factual position that they disagreed with what I did. And yes. I totally respect that. And I was just really happy to see that there was conversations that we're being able to had about what I did in a respectful way. So, I thought that was a win.
Well, if you have a look in the chat box right now, there's a lot of very lovely comments about you, saying from Steve, you made the right decision, Krystle. Joshua is saying, welcome, Krystle, from all of Australia. Thank you for speaking out against Dictator Dan and against the politicisation of the police force in Victoria. Lots of thumbs up. Richard says, good work. Amanda says, Krystle, here fighting with you from the health industry, and a love heart react. Adam, Chris says, Krystle, you are awesome. Thanks for speaking out. And yes, I will repeat that you are on LinkedIn. Krystle does need a job. So
yes, I am
you know,
officially unemployed.
she is unemployed, and Dana says you're based, Krystle. And yes, hi Dana. Now, David, I know that you've met Krystle. You've met in the past. What was your what was your impression of Krystle when you met Krystle? Like, did you know like how awesome and brave this one was going to be?
I didn't know, but I will say one thing that Krystle's really contributed to solidifying in my mind. Over the last 18 months, anyone that's been following me will know that I've been very, very critical of the police response to the pandemic. And over that journey, I've spoken to a number of police officers, and a number of them, you know, just in person at protests and things like that I've gone to witness. A number of them have reached out to me as well. And what I've come to realise is that there is great diversity in the police force, of course, as Krystle would know, and that many of them are very upset with their current situation and don't want to be doing what they're doing right now, what they've been forced to do during the pandemic. And I think I had this conversation at another Liberty chat with Campbell, and he was much harder on the police than I was. And I think that was...
I'm still here.
Yeah, I think that was probably...
He's supposed to have his
growling
sound
in the
on.
background.
No, sorry.
I think I probably would have agreed with Campbell maybe, you know, a year ago. But my position is now that I feel that the police, you know, especially the rank and file members, have been put in this awful situation that they don't want to be in, that they didn't sign up for. And yeah, it's pretty horrible. And it's wonderful that there's brave people like Krystle who, you know, there's been a lot of people recently that I've noticed that have said, okay, I need to draw a line and decide, you know, what is my ethical boundary here? And Krystle's clearly drawn that line and said, okay, I can't go any further doing this. But I've noticed a number of people in various roles, not just in the police, have drawn that line and said, no, I can't cross that line. And even with Tim and I, like we've said, you know, with sacking members of parliament who don't hand over their papers, we said, look, we can't cooperate with that. We have to dissent on that, right? We can't just, you know, go along with it. And look, I think it's important that people decide where their boundaries are ethically and defend those lines in the sand. And I've got, you know, nothing but respect for people like Krystle who've made that decision. And clearly it was a big personal decision that has resulted in, you've lost your job effectively and come under public scrutiny, which you wouldn't have otherwise had. But it's important for people to stand up and speak out about these things. And I encourage people to stand up and speak out about things and where they feel uncomfortable. And
David, my point, I'll go away again like I meant to. My point's this: they should have followed Krystle in droves. They are showing incredible cowardice by not standing up. If it was an industrial dispute, people there'd be industrial action if it was on paying conditions. Well, this is an ethical issue. And look, when Tony Abbott is prepared to call out the Victorian police and say they're acting, quote, like stormtroopers, unquote, that's pretty significant.
It is.
That really is. Anyway, that was my thought. That's why I've been so tough about it. But I'll go away for a few minutes, mate.
That was Campbell's 2 cents, and I got to say I'm with Campbell on this as well. And I've spoken to Krystle about this. There's a good comment here from Cameron, who says, as an attorney, I can say the message Krystle gave on Discernible was fantastic and truthful. The concerns she cited line up with what many officers have told me, but are too scared to say publicly. I've even had a few around the court speak to me quietly as they tell me they're rooting for us in court to beat the COVID fines. So that's great to hear. Glenn also says, Krystle, you are a hero. You give me hope for this country. So that's pretty sweet, very inspiring, sort of goes on. Another Cameron, different Cameron says, WA will be hiring a new premier. Maybe that could be your new job.
WA is a beautiful place, actually. I've been there once and it was Mandurah and I absolutely loved it. So I'll keep that one at the back.
I don't know. They seem to love him over there. It's a bit of a weird cult, a bit like here as well. So,
Please don't leave Victoria though, Krystle. We need you. The last thing we want is all the people who have strong ethics to leave the state. Like that's the very last thing that we want, right?
Well, look, I think definitely in these times where you know just this such bizarre experience that Victorians are facing. I don't know if I shared it in the Matt Wong interview, but I'm sharing it here. Before March 2020, I did not know that Daniel Andrews was the Premier of Victoria. I cared that little about politics. I really did. It did not affect my life. And I just went about and did my business and I lived my life, which that's like a commonplace for many Australians who have taken their freedoms and democracy for granted and never really cared who was in power because it didn't really impact them. But what we're finding now in this state is just how much intrusion a government can have into your life and how much they can impact every aspect of your home life, your family unit, your job, where you can travel, what you can buy, who you can see, whether or not you can go and see a loved one off at a funeral, celebrate a marriage. These things have impacted on every single one of us in this state. And it's for those reasons that I think that there will be a movement like there has never been before in Victoria towards championing change so that the Labor government is removed and that we don't ever see this type of intrusion into people's human rights ever again. And that's what I hope that the Lib Dems can do for us.
Yeah,
what Krystle says is like rings totally true. I've never seen so many people who have had no involvement in politics whatsoever their whole life, all of a sudden paying very, very serious attention to politics. And, you know, I think most other MPs that I've spoken to have noticed the same thing. Lots and lots of people contacting them who, you know, normally in politics, you get lobby groups, you get activist groups, you get concerned individuals and things like that. But never have I seen such broad array of just normal people contacting politicians who've never had any interest in politics whatsoever.
That's spot on. Now, there's a bit of a cheeky question here for you from Adam. Are you single? Just asking. No, she's not.
No, I'm not. I have an incredibly rock solid partner in life who is a police officer, actually. And I had to have this conversation with him before I decided to do what I did with Matt Wong, because it was completely my decision. And I called him, he was at work, and I called him and I said, listen, I have to say something. I can't keep living like this. I can't sleep. I can't eat. I cannot stop thinking about how wrong this is and how we're not seeing anyone in leadership stand up and try and bring people together and show unity. All we're seeing is division, and we're seeing that in the police. We're seeing that in the government at the Labor leadership. And then we're seeing that spill out onto the streets in violence between police and community. And our reputation is just being shut all over, basically. I have to say something. I cannot remedy this anymore. But I know that me doing this will affect you. So I need to ask you whether or not you can stand by me, or whether or not you have to say, I love you, but I can't do this fight with you. And he's at work and he's in the car and I can hear the police radio in the background. And he said, I love you. Of course I'll stand by you. And so obviously I got all very teary and emotional, and I was, you know, feeling very thankful. And my partner has been an absolute rock solid supporter for me.
That's so awesome. Because yeah, it would definitely put him in a difficult position given his work as well. There's a comment here from Christopher who says, as an ex-police officer, I admire Krystle. I agree with Campbell that many more should have supported her. Yeah, there's a few different comments in here, basically about Krystle. Another one from Grant saying, Krystle is so well spoken. She would be a good candidate to run for office. Yep, so there's a whole bunch of comments about how wonderful. Well, another one from Rita, time to dip your toes in politics, Krystle. Yeah, so all very positive comments here, Krystle, which is wonderful.
Thank you. That's really lovely, guys. I really
yeah.
do appreciate that. And if you wanted to throw in a few questions into the Q&A, I'm happy to answer what I can in relation to what I did or the concerns that you might have about some of the issues that I raised in my discernible interview. Absolutely happy to answer any of those questions as well.
Yes, Krystle will be here like on the Zoom still for anyone who wants to ask any more questions. But Krystle, what about can you speak a little bit just briefly about your GoFundMe? Do you want to plug that for the authorised workers?
Yes, so we have a GoFundMe page, which is Authorised Workers Unite Against Mandates. It was initially set up by police and it was going to be a police-funded fight at court. When we realised just, how many people out there that were affected from these Cho directions, we thought that this was a fantastic opportunity to work with the community and maybe sort of be a little bit of a healing exercise. So we opened up the GoFundMe to everybody, and the money won't get used to fight a federal court action unless we can fight on behalf of a very wide pool of authorised workers. Many of you may have seen that there was a successful court outcome for nurses today at Monash. That team is the team that we're working with. So the barristers that fought and won that federal case are the same barristers that we're working with to see what fight we can mount at the federal court here against the mandates and hopefully achieve a stay on the current directions. Look, there's nothing guaranteed. This is completely novel in terms of these arguments that have been brought to court, but we are working, and that's why I said before, I've never worked so hard, having all of these conversations and linking in with QCs and barristers and solicitors and all sorts of people to try and bring everybody together to make sure that we can mount the right argument that has the best chance of a successful outcome at court is what we're working on. And that GoFundMe is the money ultimately that we need so that we can then fund that court action.
Excellent. Well, I thank you very, very much, Krystle, for joining us. And as I said, everyone, she will be in the chat box and in the questions. There's a couple more questions in there for you, Krystle. I'll let you answer because there's a couple of sort of ones that might take a little bit longer for you to answer. But thank you so much. And thanks again for joining us on Liberty Chat.
Thank you, guys. Very nice to be here. Bye-bye.
See you, Krystle.
Well, now it is time once again for Mr. Ruddick's blistery history. What have you got for us today, John?
Okay, I've got an exciting topic. Okay, so we all know that New Year's Eve is a big deal. New Year's Eve 1999 that turned into 2000 wasn't just New Year's Eve, wasn't just New Century's Eve, it was New Millennium Eve. Now, on that night, the History Channel, which goes all around the world. We've got it on Foxtel, but it goes all around the world. It's a respected channel. They had a 4-hour special, which I have watched multiple times. And that 4-hour special ranked the 100 most influential people of the previous millennium, the previous 1,000 years. So it's not saying the best people. A lot of them were baddies, but they're saying the most influential people. Now, obviously, this is subjective, but they did consult very, very widely, lots of heads of states and lots of like presidents of the United States and academics, of course. And it was a terrific show. And you can watch it on YouTube. It's called The Biography of the Millennium. And there's an important point I want to make out of this, but just to sort of give you a flavour. So we had Vasco da Gama, who sort of opened up the Asia Pacific to Europe. He came 99th. Ronald Reagan, my hero, came 85th. Joan of Arc, 58th, Marco Polo, 54, William the Conqueror, 45th, Mao Zedong, 53rd, Voltaire, 37, Vladimir Lenin, 35, Napoleon, 27th, Genghis Khan, 22nd, Adam Smith, who's one of our heroes, came 20th. I think that's pretty accurate. Yeah. John Locke came 18th. He's even more of a hero of ours. Hitler came 16th. Okay, well, probably hard to argue with that. Okay, obviously a baddie. The highest American on the list was Thomas Jefferson. He came 14th. Karl Marx came 8th. William Shakespeare, they said, look, this guy shaped the English language, and the English language is the biggest thing in, the biggest language in the world by a mile. He came 5th. The guy that came first was Gutenberg, who invented the printing press. Okay, look, before Gutenberg, You had to write the book out, okay? And then Gutenberg gave us a hell of a lot of knowledge. So understandably, he deserves number one. Anyway, my point is this. In the top 10, there are 5 scientists. Now, and I'm going to go through them in a moment. But my point, my key point, the reason I brought up the biography of the millennium is this. When science gets, when there's a contentious scientific debate and it then gets enveloped in politics, and politics is about power. So let's say you've got a scientific debate over here, and then the political people, the state gets involved, and the state takes one side in a big way. Therefore, they persecute one of those other sides. And whenever that happens, when the state gets and then most of the scientific debate says, oh well, yeah, we'll go along with what the government says. We'll go along with the government because
there's funding.
That's right, funding, exactly, funding. Okay, so now, but there's a very small group of scientists who say, I don't care about the funding. I don't care about the persecution and being called a heretic. And some of them say, I don't even care about being killed because I know what scientifically is right. Okay, so let's go through them. So we had Galileo, came as the 10th most important person of the last 1,000 years. Now,
well deserved.
Well deserved, that's right. So, okay, so he said, look, now Galileo was threatened by the establishment at that time, which was the Catholic Church. And they said, we're going to kill you unless you recant. Galileo did recant, okay, but he's still a legend in our eyes, okay. Now Copernicus came 9th. He was a Polish guy that lived about 2 or 3 generations before Galileo. Now Galileo had the benefit of working out the world is round because telescopes. Copernicus just worked it out without the telescope. He worked out that the Earth is circulated around the moon, around the sun. And now he was too frightened to publish his findings. He's obviously a massive genius. He lived up in what we now call Poland. He was obviously a genius. He was too frightened to publish his works until his deathbed. Okay, now then we had Albert Einstein, came number 8th. Now he was a German, and he left Germany early on. Thank God he did. After the Nazis came to power. And he left because the Nazis loved their science. They loved corrupting science. And they said about Einstein, they came out with this paper and they said, well, 100 of our top physicists say that Albert Einstein's wrong. And Albert Einstein famously came back. He said, well, look, if I was wrong, they need one of them to say I was wrong. And that's like whenever you hear all these people talk about the settled science on COVID or global warming, 97% of scientists. Science isn't about the number of people.
It ain't about numbers.
That's right.
About numbers, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now then we had. I'll tell you who came 3rd. Fourth was Charles Darwin, who was obviously caused a massive revolution in our thinking about who we are, and he worked out the theory of evolution 20 years before he published Origin of the Species. He was too scared to publish it. He then did publish it. In the 1860s, it was extremely controversial. The establishment absolutely ganged up on him and terrorized him. But he's basically most of the world accept now that he is right. Now there is an exception of a great scientist who came 2nd on the list, which was Isaac Newton. I don't think he was persecuted. He wasn't. Well, that was because he lived in liberal England in the 17th century, and that had the Protestant Reformation, and they were sort of more open to it. But my point is, okay, whenever you have a scientific debate, which should be strictly amongst the scientists, but when the politics gets involved and money gets involved, as Campbell says, okay, and they want to persecute one side, and throughout the course of history, it's a pretty good indicator who's right on the science. Who's right on the science is the side that's getting persecuted, okay? And one last little thing. This biography of the millennium was about the most influential people of the last 1,000 years. Now, if they had done it, the most influential human beings of all time, I don't think there's any doubt it would have, of course, been Jesus of Nazareth, okay? Because, what year are we in now? We're in 2021. Where did we come up with 2021? Well, it's 2021 years since he was born, so he's a pretty big deal. Okay, I'm not a churchgoer myself. I've got a hell of a lot of respect for Jesus as a wise teacher. Okay, now, and he was the ultimate rebel. Now, I'll tell you something very, very interesting Jesus said. Okay, he said, just before he got killed, he got crucified, he had a massive fight with the establishment. And he said, and of course they hated his guts because he was the ultimate rebel. And Jesus said, look, you guys, you Pharisees, you go around talking about how much you love all these great prophets in the past. But if you were alive who got persecuted and you say, oh, well, yeah, it was terrible, all that persecution that you gave all these great prophets. But Jesus said, look, if you were alive at the time of those prophets, you would have been the persecutors. Now, this is why all these people, all these corrupt scientists today, they say, oh, well, we love Galileo, we love Copernicus, we love Darwin. Okay, the truth is, I'm absolutely certain that Jesus is right. All these people today who are politicizing science, that they would have been back in the day of Galileo and back in the day of Copernicus and Einstein and Darwin, these people today who go on about science, they would have been saying, oh, he's a terrible person, that Galileo, we've got to get him. So my point is, the Liberal Democrats believe in a separation of science and politics. Here ends the lesson.
Here. And
I've got a question for John.
I thought I was going to get very theological there.
I know. I didn't know where it was going. I just want to quickly say that I had to do a school project on Galileo in grade 5, and it was the only project that I failed. And it was because I was busy. I had an equestrian event on that weekend and I didn't do any study and I failed it, and it scarred me for a very long time. So that was my thing in Galileo. But David, you were going to say something.
I had a question for John. So he was talking about this 4-hour special on New Year's Eve, 1999. Like, did you actually sit there on New Year's Eve and watch a special on the History Channel? Like, seriously, I was at a bush doof and I was having the time of my life. I can hardly remember a thing. Like, man, like, I really hope you watched that on recording or something.
Okay, now that is a good question, David. What had thankfully happened only a couple of months beforehand, Foxtel had brought in the record button.
Oh.
So I want, Mr. Limbrick, I want you to absolutely assure you that my Millennium Eve party was, I absolutely exploited the opportunity to have a party, yes.
Thank God for that.
Thank God for that, yeah. Otherwise, we'd have had to move to Expel, wouldn't we, David?
Yeah, you'd be
I wouldn't be happy if he wasn't partying on in 1999 New Year's Eve. I got a funny story.
You're not a real libertarian.
I got a funny story.
I can remember I had a hangover and I watched it quite through in my bed, sitting there the next afternoon. Yes,
I was actually very heavily pregnant. So my daughter was born not long after that. So mine wasn't very exciting. I should have been watching that History Channel, but I wasn't.
I got sucked in by the Y2K bug because I've been working on it. I've been working on it actually because I worked in IT, and I was sort of thinking, geez, I wonder if there's going to be like planes falling out of the sky and the world's going to end. That's
how you spent the evening, really. You were this.
No. I was at the bush.
Come on a minute. You were in the broom closet with a blanket around you. Something over your head.
Having fun, but I had a boot full of baked beans and water. And I was saying to my friends, they were all laughing at me. They were all laughing at me for bringing a boot full of baked beans. And I said, well, you know, if we can't get back to civilization tomorrow, I know who will have the last laugh, but actually it was them who had the last laugh. So I ended up eating baked beans for the next 3 months, and I never want to see baked beans ever again. I'm sick of them.
Well, who would have thought, John, that's where your history chat would go. Rachel was with me. She was also pregnant, heavily pregnant as well. That was us, Rach. It wasn't terribly exciting. I'm sure I watched something interesting on TV. I don't know. Anthony says, great topic, John. The influence of a lack of ethics has resulted in net zero true science this millennium. Ian says...
Well, I just jump in just for a sec. I know I'm on my old hobby horse, but again, if you really want to go through an interesting exercise, go onto the National Library of Australia website, there's a thing called Trove, which allows you to see all these digitised newspapers and do some searches on the greenhouse effect and like. You will find a plethora of stories from the 1980s that sound exactly like they were published last week, with all about sea level rise, no ice at the North Pole, no snow in the Alps. It goes on and on and on and on. And it was all from the science, the scientists of the time.
Yes.
And so you have every right to then say, well, hang on, before we go and do all these things for net zero, can't we just sort of question you about your latest projections? Because your last lot were wrong, like COVID modelling as well, by the way.
Yes. Well, I mean, back in my day, it was all the hole in the ozone layer, and I used to get angry at my nana who used to spray all the hairspray on her hair. But John, I'm not sure how old you are, but some people think you're quite young. Rita says in 1999, John wasn't old enough to rage. And Ian also says New Year's Eve 2000 was past John's bedtime. So
well, I'm very happy to hear
have you got what are you using then? You know.
Well, look, there is something that I'm very left wing on, and I have disagreed with right wing people all my life about. And that is, and people are going to laugh at me, but I believe in it. And if you want me to rave on about it, I will, but I won't. I believe in a vegetarian diet. Okay. Right.
Yeah.
Cut.
So,
stop this madness.
I'm not a perfect vegetarian, but I have always gone out of my way to eat raw broccoli and things like that. Yes.
Very good. No, broccoli is fantastic, anti-estrogenic. So we better sort of, we've got to, well, yes, as Adam says, no farting cows for John. Although Steve says, ooh, degeneracy. Sean says, I respect your right to choose.
Yes, it's your right to choose to eat whatever you like.
Correct. Ron says we're all too happy. I want some of what we're on. So we are having fun. Yes, it's Friday. We're on the drinks. Anyway, so I am mindful of the time. But David, very, very quickly, can you give us a very quick update on your parliamentarian in exile? What's going to happen? Can you give us any sneaky info on, I'm still thinking the wicked van is the way to go, but
we're not doing a wicked van, but we're doing something cool. So for those of you that aren't aware, I was actually suspended from Parliament along with Tim Quilty, Catherine Cumming, and another member of Parliament who I'm not going to out yet because they're going to out themselves eventually. So we were suspended on Monday, and next week we're going to participate in Parliament remotely. I can't do it from my office. There'll be more details about this next week, but basically my office was partially destroyed by a vandal, which it's totally
hang on. Your office in Parliament House?
No, my office in Parliament House I'm not allowed to enter, and my office in Cheltenham has been destroyed by water, by a deliberate attack, so I can't actually use it. So we've got another venue, and it's going to be a really, really cool venue. As you might have noticed, the occupancy rate in CBD Melbourne is very low at the moment. So there's lots of people with empty properties. So we've found a property. It's a really cool venue. We're going to do lots of cool stuff, and it's going to be a Parliament in exile. So I'm not going to release any further details until the morning, because the man's going to come after us. They're going to try and shut us down. We're not going to let them shut us down. They don't know the venue. They don't know what we're doing. They don't know what we've got planned. It's going to be awesome. You're going to love it. So stay tuned.
That's excellent. And if anyone has called into the admin office over the last day, I changed we had a pretty boring, phone message, because obviously I've been working from home a lot of it, but now I'm actually definitely not allowed to go into the office. So, and a couple of people have sort of said, oh, it's a bit sad, there's no one in the office. It sounds pretty lame. And yes, so I changed the message, and I took away any swearing that I might have actually wanted to say. And I just said, well, no, we're not allowed in the office because of the mandate. So if anyone does call the office, don't worry, because I get an email and then I'll call you. But I think we better end up tonight. We've had a very fun Friday night Liberty chat, and thank you to our panelists again. Does anyone want to say one thing very, very quickly to finish up? I'll give you like 1 minute if you want. Oh, Krystle's come back. Does anyone want to say one more thing?
Freedom Manifesto. Okay, you go, Cam.
I just implore people who are in this meeting tonight, this campaign particularly is going to be one fought in social media. And if you're not already following the party,
Yes.
the three politicians, and well, two wannabes and one elected official. You know, if you're not following us already, please follow us. Please retweet. Please post. Please engage with the people who are against us, the trolls. Get into the battle. Just have the courage. Just get in there and fight the good fight, and by sharing this stuff and letting people know that what's going on. And if we can build this, I mean, I know David's got a great following in social media. I've got a pretty good one in Twitter, but I'm trying to build Facebook. That's how we really make a difference and get and bypass a media who we know won't cover the important things we're talking about.
I totally back what Campbell just said. Social media is our ability to bypass mainstream media if necessary. We're not giving up on mainstream media. We're still talking to mainstream media, but we need an audience outside of that. And I totally agree with what Campbell said. Please follow us. Make comments, retweet, post, share stuff, whatever. Yes. My request though to people would be to remain as civil and rational as possible. When you support us in a way that is nasty, or in a way that is perceived as mean, it's actually counterproductive. So what we need is people to be rational and polite, and make a clear case for things, and also be very careful about sharing things that might be misinformation, because that hinders our case as well. And certainly if you notice anything that any of us share that might be inaccurate or misinformation, please call us out. Let us know. We don't want to share misinformation. We only want to share accurate information. So if we share something inadvertently that is wrong, please let me know and I'll correct it. I'm sure Campbell and John would do the same thing. We're not perfect. We sometimes make mistakes, of course.
Exactly right. And obviously, please follow David, John and Campbell on all the social media, and Krystle. And once again, Krystle is on LinkedIn and needs a job. And also don't forget Krystle's GoFundMe, which she has put in the chat. I'd also like to say next week, we will bring our remiss guest from tonight, Mr. Satyajit Mehra. He'll be on next week from Washington. And we're also going to welcome the wonderful Mr. Tom Switzer, the Executive Director of the Centre for Independent Studies. So we will have two guests next week. Once again, if you're not already a member, get to our website, ldp.org.au, join, donate, volunteer, register to be a candidate, and we shall see you all next week on Liberty Chat. Thanks, everyone.
See you guys.